live, it says, which means it's actually quite exciting because I'm not doing this very often. I'm just going to adjust myself. I can see everyone is winking already. I'll make it a little higher. So I can actually see that Selma is already on here. That means I can send her something. See now, everyone, I guess that believes that you are actually already able to hear me, and it's always so exciting. I decided to put Selma on right away. Hi there, Selma. I have not introduced you yet, but I thought it was better to just put you on as we speak.
Definitely. Hi.
Good to see you, Selma. And if you don't mind sitting for a second, I'm so excited to do this actually because I have some followers on Instagram, and for the ones who are already listening, I can say that I normally don't do this because I want to, out of respect of, apparently there's so much going on screens, right? So I try to not take too much of people's attention, as I'm so thankful for their following me already, which is quite a bit, considering how much we keep posting and I keep posting. But nevertheless, hi to all the Instagram followers. And I can see they seem to be popping on and off here. Obviously, the reason why I'm doing this today and why I have the pleasure of having you here, Selma, also, is that it is World Children's Day today. And there is a particular celebration around. We're making an effort to ask the world leaders to actually fulfill their obligations to children, right? And I think that the children question has become particularly important for me lately. And can I just quickly say, you are not a child, Selma, and that's not why you're here, because I'll get back to that later. But just while you're waiting there, I just thought it was important to say that I just want to say that the recent artwork I did called Earth Speaker actually unified a lot of knowledge that I've been gathering over the years, not just from being a parent myself of two teenagers, but now teenagers, but essentially also because I actually think that in my work, in general, in my artworks, I worked a lot with the future, and obviously history and the past is when we go to school and when we educate ourselves. There is a history lesson, but the history is, I have to do homework. I have to do my history homework, and sometimes I wonder, maybe we should have a class for the future. And what would that then be? It's like so interesting, like, oh yeah, no, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm doing algebra. Oh, I'm doing future. I think that would be sort of nice. And then I realized there's actually a lot of people who are quite interested in the future, if you sort of ask around. And there is a little bit, let me just wrap it in a different way. Let's just imagine that in the future, like in the movies, we can send people back. All these, and they're not all good, the movies, but that let's just imagine it's possible that there are people among us that are from the future. They're here. And what happens when you send people back, if I did the time machine at least, is that, of course, they would be younger, right? So I've been playing with this idea, maybe all the children today are actually grown-ups who's been sent back to us. And what are they here to do? Well, they're here to help us not making a mess. There's tons of movies who's exactly like that. I realize my idea is like not new at all. And in the context of that, I'm of course talking about the environment and the climate. And only just today, a conversation that Selma and I had earlier, and now I will get to introduce Selma. Only just today, a conversation we had went online, and it's already a great success, not because of me, but because of Selma, and it is actually very exciting. If you go to it's very confusing because now I should say, if you go to tomorrow, but that's not how it is. It's actually called, the project is called Tomorrow. So far, we made the recording yesterday. It's playing today, and it's called Tomorrow. That's not so bad. But it's a platform which is about sustainable action and somehow in diverse communities. So the homepage, in case you will see it in the comments also later, the homepage is called, funny enough, www.tomorrow.today. That was like really confusing, right? Anyway, so that means that Selma, now I get to introduce you. And the reason why I got to meet you is because I have for some time now followed and expressed my joy and excitement when hearing and seeing things about Fridays for Future. When I did the project Earth Speaker, I actually was quite inspired, frankly speaking, by Fridays for Future. And when I now, a few weeks ago, got this note from you, Selma, saying that you were doing something important and that you would like to ask me to be in on a talk, which is the one called Tomorrow, right? And I said yes, and so we got to know each other, and this is where and then my little introduction here will be over. And this is where on the way, I realized, Selma, and I thought I should say that to you in person and we can get started. On my way to meet you, I was thinking, this is so exciting. I'm gonna have a talk with Selma, who's young and who has something to say. You're a woman. I guess I might have made the sort of mistake to say a young girl. And the point what I'm trying to make here is, when we had the conversation, it didn't matter whether we're young. I mean, it matters because you are gonna stick around on this planet much longer than me. So you have a lot of time in front of you. You have like probably as much time in front of you as I have behind me. It sounds a little gloomy. I hope a little more actually, but you know what I mean? You have a little more. The point here is, I was so happy about our conversation, and I realized afterwards, it's not about you being a young girl, not at all. You are a completely valid, relevant, totally important participant in maneuvering the spaceship we sit on called Earth, just like I am. And the upside for you is that you are thinking about the things we are going to talk about much earlier than I did. Because when I was your age, I was thinking about something else, which, you know, now I drove a diesel car for so many years, and now I realize I shouldn't. Where you, being 15 or 16, or however old you are, you don't have to make that mistake. So Selma, being a part of Fridays for Future, I'm excited about introducing you in one of these very rare Insta talks that I'm only just learning how to do. But why don't you introduce yourself as well, so you don't have to be shaded or eclipsed by all my hurly-burly wording here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Olafur. I'm very excited about doing this live stream on Instagram. My name is Selma Montgomery, and I'm a 15-year-old climate activist from Denmark. And I organize and plan strikes and do campaigning in the movement Fridays for Future, which was a movement that was started after Greta Thunberg from Sweden striked, and she started this movement across the entire globe to call out our politicians and the people in power and demand climate action. And like when we were most people on the streets, we were 6 million young people across the entire world. So I'm very happy to be a part of a movement like that. Yes.
And Selma, what I have noticed also is that, of course, when we see pictures from the global summits or the sort of COPs and so on, it is evidently often Selma or a few other people who are, should I say, the front faces. But the truth of the matter is that Fridays for Future is actually not about the top of the mountain or the top of the pyramid, if one should even call it a pyramid, as it is a sphere, it's about everyone, right? So I think that one thing which is really great about Fridays for Future, it is that everyone is important, everyone is an activist, everyone is doing something, everyone is also reaching out. And there is this kind of non-hierarchical thing. Of course, for speaking up, it's good to have sort of a campaign leader of sorts. But as with Greta and you, there's a high degree of unselfishness. You often say it's not about me, it's not about us. And this, I think, Fridays for Future could be a great inspiration for other sort of organizations where there is a lot of focus on leadership as such.
Yeah, exactly. As you say, like, it's not about us. Fridays for Future is a movement consisting of millions of young people across the globe, and everyone in that movement is a part of the movement, an important part, and is part of pushing for change. And you're equally important if you're from Denmark or another country, or if you're good at talking or organizing or planning stuff or playing music or striking, or just want to show up with your body and go to the streets, and by that create a difference. And I think it's very beautiful that we in Fridays for Future has something called, like, we call it flat structure, because it's very important for us that no one is more important, because we're not individuals, we're a part of a greater whole, and that's what matters when we go to the streets.
And let's just now I think we both have done a bit of sort of introduction, and now we can take a deep breath and just arrive here, because yes. So, and I can also ask everyone watching, I wonder whether I can see it on the screen if anyone is actually watching, but I guess there's like so much going on and I'm trying to concentrate. The thing is, I'm actually really excited that you're here, Selma. Let's just take a step back and say, okay, so here we are. We're sitting on Instagram. Hi, Instagram. We're sitting with all the followers, or many followers. I'm trying to see it. Oh, I see 600 it seems. So hi there, 600 of you around from here and there. We greet you. It's quite nice to meet you, actually, in this very thin digital way. And now let's see if we can just jump back to this notion of the future. I'm so excited about trying to understand better, and I thought this would be a nice thing to ask you, Selma. I said before you were sent, when I did Earth Speaker, I very much want this idea that, imagine if we sent a letter to ourselves in the future. I even thought of making an artwork about it. Why don't you sit down and write something you want to do? And the address is myself when I am 75. In my case, that's about 25 years. And you can just send it send it to email. Where should we send it to? I'm sure we can make a box on the blockchain or however, right? I said put it to at my grandparents' place, but that's maybe not the best idea. So what I'm saying is that when we get 75, we got a letter from ourselves. Say, oh, I got a letter from me. And then it says, I hope you did. And what would you write in the letter, Selma? I mean, what would you hope when you got your own letter? And I just call it an artwork because then it gets a little attention maybe. What would you write to yourself like, hey, Selma, this is sent from when I was 15 to I was 75. What would you write to yourself?
Yeah. I think that's a very good question. For me, like, thinking about my own future and me being 75, I often try not to do that, or like, I think it's very hard to think about the future, because my future and our future right now is so uncertain, so scary, the way that, like, in the direction our world is moving right now with the climate crisis and climate change and all that. So what I'm trying to do when I think about the future is that I normally say that we're living the future right now, and we often, when we talk about the climate crisis and climate change, we think about, oh, what in the future, and in 50 years, what do we want to say to ourselves. But what we're not realizing is that the climate crisis is already here, and people are already dying. So if the future seems far away and abstract, that's not really the case, because the climate crisis is here already. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice we're living the future, because I think the reason why I asked like this, because I'm also quite interested in, you know, in hope, and we spoke a little bit about, you know, where does hope, how do we maintain hope or optimism? And we have hope against fear, maybe, or concerns. And as you said in our other talk, which means you should go and see the other talk on www.tomorrow.today. And what you say is that one should be careful to not say either hope or either concerns. And I will let people go look for themselves. But there's notion of being hopeful as a driving force, to have hope. You know, I find that very interesting, because this believing in that the future or the tomorrow can be better than yesterday. This idea that, because, you know, many people, and we meet them all the time, they say, oh, but you know, when I was young, or back then, or last week, or the other, before Corona, and I think they think everything was much nicer. I guess we could call it conservatism. And they tend to walk, you know, they walk backwards into the future, and they face backwards. You know, they look backwards and walk backwards into the future. And I think it's, the hope thing has to do with actually daring to walk frontal. And this is what you say the future is now. You are actually facing the future as you walk into it. And it is also, whether you like it or not, facing you back, or facing us, I should say. And this, I think, this courage, where do you think that comes from? And now I lost my letter here, but where do you think the courage, where do you get the courage from?
Yeah. So I think hope is a very hard thing, and a very precious thing to have right now, when you think about the state of the world. And I think for me, it's often like, we all, as climate activists, we say, oh, it's all so bad, and look at this and this, but there's still hope. We can still do something, but it's also very hard. And for me, in my activism, I try to talk about, am I fighting for something, or am I fighting against something? So am I fighting, like, for a better world, for a greener world and a more just world, and a world where we're not facing these problems, where people aren't dying from the climate change and climate disasters? Or am I fighting against something, like these oil companies, and with all this anger for older generation who has sort of created this problem, or at least made it worse. So I think for me, it's also about, like, hope is the decision to choose to fight for something, to fight for a better world than what we're living in right now. And that's hard, and it's also fair sometimes to lose hope. That's only human when we look at the world right now. And I think it's, like, what I normally do when I sometimes lose hope is that I find communities, and I find other people, and I see myself as a part of a movement and a greater whole, and that for me, I think, creates hope. Because as individuals, it can be so overwhelming with the climate crisis and everything, but when we're a part of a greater whole, suddenly this hope it starts existing. And that's a beautiful thing, and that's also part of being in a movement pushing for change.
I was with, no, it's very interesting. I was with, I'm interested in who does these actions, and I'm very interested also how you refer to yourself as a part of a movement, and that movement gives you not just strength individually, but it also gives you legitimacy, and it gives you a kind of, you know, it gives you a sense of contributing or being a part of, or, you know, sort of co-producing. You are producing the future and not consuming the future, one could say. You're actually co-creating it. I was with a woman from another group called Extinction Rebellion just 6 months ago or so. Her name is Ellen, and she has inspired me so immensely. It was really amazing. But there was something that struck me. She said she has decided to not have children. And it's just like, and she has decided to stop her education and just do what she's doing. And she has decided, and she was so radical. And I was actually moved by it. Because when she said it, she was very emotional because it was such a big choice for her. But it was so, I mean, the gravity with which she said it almost brought tears to my eyes. And you know, of course, it's more complex and so on and so forth. But this is, so when we talk about hope, I just want to say hope is not some kind of overcooked piece of pasta. We said, oh, hope. No, hope is a fierce, precise, and you know, it's a radical, precise thing that we live with. And in these actions, that's what I actually wanted to say. And it's about the future also. A friend of mine, Andri Snær, an author in Iceland, a book about water, actually. He just made another book, author books, right? Makes sense. So he made, together with some of his friends, a funeral in Iceland, a funeral that I attended with friends, and I ended up being a little bit involved because there was a sort of a meeting of heads of states and so on at the same time. So we got all into action. But the funeral was for a glacier that has passed away. And we went, it was high up on the highlands, so it was really hard to get there and so on. But once you're there, there was also this physical presence. You stood there where the glacier used to be. And you see all these people who come from other countries and on bicycles and walked up there. And we stood there, and then there was a funeral. And it was so incredible. Like, this is what was in particular incredible. The author, being good with words, of course, there was a plaquette on a rock, like a gravestone, right? And on the plaquette it says, "We are here today putting, what do you say? It's a funeral for this glacier. The glacier is called Oak, so and so, and there was the GPS starting and so and so." And then it says, in a way, it says, he liked cornflakes or something, right? It says, "We buried our friend the glacier here, knowing what to do, preventing the death about the climate. We know what we have to do. And because it's so far up in the mountains and very hard to get to, evidently when people find this little piece of metal on some rock on a random hill, because the glacier is gone, you can't see it, just looks like nothing, right? You say, oh, there's a metal there. And the very last sentence it says, you who come here in the future, we know what to do. You who come in the future will know if we did it. And it is as if it was this kind of letter I spoke about before. And imagine if we go there in 50 years and we look at it, oh, there's a glacier. And think back, well, did we do it? It's a good question. And that is why I, exactly like you in my art, I like very much this idea of giving the abstract stuff structure so we can touch it. That's why I brought the ice in Ice Watch into places where people are living their daily lives and they can put their hand on it. So they say, oh, this is the ice. It's cold. And you know, everyone knows ice is cold, but they still put their hand on it. Oh, it's completely cold. Because the knowledge of physical, you know, what we experience, having a friend that you have met not only on Instagram, is different. It is much more about action and activism when it is actually real. And that is why I think essentially Fridays for Future, I think, has this, well, it's actually happening. It is not just a theoretical concept. But see, I actually got some questions. This was not a question, but why don't you say what you have at your heart, and I will prepare, because a lot of great people send us questions, and I can see they're much more important than me, so I should really focus on them so that I don't forget that. But please, why don't you take, if I can give you a little frame to say, this is now your spot to speak, Selma.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just like to comment on you're talking a lot about like communicating with the future, like sending letters or all this, but like we can actually communicate with the future. Like it's the children of the world, right? We're living with the future, because like they are the people, we are the people who's going to live with the consequences of the lack of action right now. So the future is very abstract, but it's also very close, and I think that's also important to think about. And also with this, you talk about like making artworks, and I also think that's what like art can do in the climate fight. It brings us closer to our surroundings, to our earth. It helps us feel this sorrow and for losing this beautiful world. And I think that's also what art helps me to do. It helps me create this language for this sorrow it is to lose this beautiful world, and to all these things that are dying, and all these terrible things are happening, and it can be hard to find the words to express, but art brings it closer. It manifests the climate crisis in a very, very beautiful way, and create a shared language consisting of like feelings and visions that we can unite around as humans. And I think that's very important and essential in the climate fight, and that's also what you're doing, Olafur. Like bringing the climate crisis closer, and that's also, of course it's a privilege that we need to imagine the climate crisis right now, because there's like here in the rich countries, because there are already people living with the consequences of the climate crisis, like not having food, not having water, needing to like move or flee because like their local communities are being affected. So it's also a great privilege to be so distanced from the climate crisis that we actually need something like art to make us understand that this is a real problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well, thank you for talking so incredibly nice about art. Oh, I should have written that down. No, but this is so interesting. I also acknowledge what you said about the privilege. That was very well put. Inspiring indeed. I think that sometimes, now I think this is more interesting than the questions again, but I will get back to the questions. But sometimes, you know, it's not necessarily a work of art, but let's in this case say it could be a work of art, could also be a book or piece of music or culture as such, and other things. But sometimes I think we stand in front of something which we engage in. It does require a bit of engaging, otherwise you just look at it and you go like, I'm numb then, right? But if you engage and you say, not just what am I looking at, but also maybe a little bit like, why am I looking at it? Why is it here? Why did someone paint this painting? And so on. So if you have that situation, you could call it like, there's a degree of focus, intimacy maybe. So like with a great book or poems, for instance, right? So, and suddenly you realize, I know that color. I know that structure on the painting, the surface, that house in the painting, or that story in the book. This poem gives words, structure, scaffold. It gives a system to feelings that I have in me that I have not yet fully come around to articulate. It's exactly how I would say it. Or maybe even, this is me. I just didn't come around to say it yet because it's like kind of in my belly, it's in my subconsciousness. It's a fear I carry. Now I know what it is. Do you know? So there's that occasionally, it's not always like that. sometimes you stand or you're in an exhibition, you look at a movie and you realize, it's me in the movie. It is giving space, structure, identity. It is retelling the story that was untold earlier, and I needed to hear it to liberate that part of myself, right? And this, I think, culture sometimes does when it works in a sense, reflecting your emotional need. I don't mean you necessarily, but, and I think we underestimate the need, or it's also a little bit a taboo to say, oh, I have needs. You know, that we have emotional needs, and we have the need for someone to give structure to what we cannot say ourselves, which is why being in a movement is so great, because suddenly you realize in the movement or in a demonstration, you realize, this is how I feel, this is my opinion. I just felt it, but I couldn't say it, right? So there is this, I guess you could call it, what, like this kind of convergence, or some kind of, you know, you change, you transform, and you realize, yes, this is, and what is so important is that you feel a part of something. You feel that it was as if the painting was listening to you. It was like, it's not you who took from the painting took something from you. So when I work with art, I like this way of turning it around. And let's see if I can take the questions now, because I can talk like this forever, but because it's so interesting to listen to you, Selma. Anyway, so because actually Seal is called, Spellman from UNICEF in the UK, and actually also WWF ambassador, she asked us, but she asked you, I think, or maybe it's us, what can adults do to help support young people more in their work or activism? What can adults do? Okay, that's a good question, actually. Yeah. Also, in case there are some adults listening here, is what can they actually do?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Also, because there's this sort of misunderstanding that fighting for climate action has sort of become a youth responsibility, because we have it has been us who has organized and gone to the streets, like, and shown up. But I think what's very important is that to solve the climate crisis is not the responsibility of a single generation. It's the responsibility of everyone. And we need everyone in this fight. And of course, it's so important that we listen to the children and the youth, because these are the people who's going to live with the consequences. And I think that we can bring very important insights. But as an adult, I think it's also important to take on responsibility, because often it sort of also becomes a way for adults to like push away their responsibility by saying, okay, the youth got this. They're organizing, they're going to the streets. Like, it's their fight, but it's not our fight. Like, it's not their fight, it's our fight, right? Yes. So also as an adult, to take on this responsibility and see what can I do in my daily life to push for climate action, to go to my work or my workplace, or
because that's also the next question, like the kind of the nitty-gritty of what can I do in the sense, because first of all, I realized that Spellman actually, she also does It's Time, the festival, where I got to speak a little bit about, I presented the Earth Speaker, my little app for children or for kids, right, or for young people. So thanks for this. But the next question is actually on the doing itself. It's a human called Ida from Billund, from Denmark. Billund is in Denmark. And she asked you, Selma, quite specifically, how can I do what you do?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think everyone can do what I do. What I do is that I use my voice to push for change. And I think that I think that all youth have that voice inside of us, but we're not used to using it because we're also often told by society that when you're young, you only want to sleep, or you're lazy, or you don't care. But we care. And I think what's important is that you find this voice and you start speaking up. And doesn't mean that you have to go on like international media and do live streams. But also talk with your friends, talk with your family, talk with the people you meet, and use your voice to push for change. And
Yes.
become an activist, to put it simply. And by being an activist, it doesn't have to be, we often have this very specific way of thinking about like an activist as someone who goes to like the streets with a sign and sits or demonstrate. But I mean, if you're if you have a physical handicap, you might not be able to go to the streets to demonstrate. Or
right.
like it be a lot of like things that make so that you're not comfortable with going to the streets, or doing like civil disobedience because you know that you'll be treated unfairly by the police, or
Yes, exactly.
so I think it's also very important that we rethink what it means to be an activist. For being an activist means pushing for change, and you can do that with the talents that you have, because we're all unique, and we can all push for change in different ways and use our talents in a way that changed the world. And if that means speaking up, or writing for newspapers, or maybe just like if you're good at playing music, then write a climate song, or if you're good at plan a strike, or like
it's everywhere. There's so much. I agree. Yeah, I love it. No, I also think what you said, what is maybe only partly recommended, but civic disobedience. To quote Mary Robinson, the former Prime Minister of Ireland, now a great environmentalist, she had the chair of human rights at the UN, and so on. So Mary Robinson says she would like to say that a lot of what is happening right now concerning the civic disobedience on the environment is honorable, and compared it to the apartheid. Had there not been civic disobedience, apartheid would not have ended. And I think we should be careful to say, well, apartheid and then the environment. No, it's different, but it is the same. So, and obviously, civic disobedience is a complex thing. So, and what you said about what generally what children can do, there's one area in what they can actually do like this, but they can also say to the grown-ups, listen to me, and listen to what I say. And one more thing, because you're grown up, you are smart enough to also listen to why I'm saying it. I am speaking to you, hear me, but hear why I'm speaking to you as well. Because grown-ups go like, wow, did you hear what the child say? No, you have to say, why did the child say this? Or why did the teenager? Why did the young person, and so on? And I think there's something, because it's World Children's Day, in article, there's the Child Rights Charter. In article, I think it's article 6 or 12. Yeah, 12, I think, right? It says you have to listen to young people. And that's only half of the sentence. It also says, and then you have to implement it. Yeah. It is the right of a child to be listened to and to be influential on what is happening in the world. It is not just something, well, okay, well, I'm a good parent. No, you just have to do it. I'm not asking you if you want to. You have to the grown-up. So a child can also just say, stop, listen. I'm not asking, I'm telling. Right? I am as important as a child as you. I'm probably more important because I have to bloody live here for much longer than you. That was like pretty much forever. So that I think is, there is this assumption that children are like, or young people, they are rehearsing to become responsible like grown-ups. That's not true. They are here and they are part of the world and they are as important as grown-ups. They're probably more important, which is why I always say, I do think that, and I'm actually quite serious, I do think children, when given a serious question, are excellent in answering. Such as, why do we put teenagers and young people and children into the parliament in Copenhagen, the Reichstag in Germany. In all the parliaments, that's for 3 months, the whole world run by young people. Do you think it will be, Selma, do you think it will be a better or a worse world after this?
I think that's a good question, and I definitely think that if the youth and the children had more power, we would be much more ambitious as a world society on climate action. And exactly as you're saying, I think, but I also think that like one thing is to listen to the children and the young people and all the activists. Another thing is to act on what we're saying, because everyone says that they're hearing us, that they're listening. Greta Thunberg is invited to speak at the UN and with all these prime ministers, but that doesn't change a thing if the people in power positions aren't acting on what we're saying. So I think that's also so important to act on what the activists and what the young people are saying.
Yeah, so when I have made a work of art that I'm particularly happy with, I normally say it's because it sees, meets, and hears its visitor. You know, an artwork that can see people, that meets people, which is more physical, and hears people, which is more, should I say, what do you have to bring to the table today? So I like this. I like what I say. Let's take another question. That's a question to me. Why did I make Earth Speaker? Let me just say, Jakob from Manchester. Hi, Jakob, if in case you're listening from the UK. Listen, Earth Speaker, it's an app. You can download it. It's a work of art. It's not commercial. It's not a social media platform. You can't really talk or something. It's completely on the top of sort of safety and child safety and young. So it's and it was made on behalf of the German Foreign Ministry having the presidency of the EU, just for the formal part. And I'm working closely with the amazing Goethe institutes in all over Europe and then with many schools and children, and over 1.2 million people have watched it. More than 300,000 young people have downloaded this. There's 52 million in Europe, so there's a bit to go still. Listen, so one of the reasons why I made it is actually because I was inspired by people like you and by Fridays for Future. How do we make a messy, decentralized, self-organized organization where everyone's voice is unique, but there is a big sort of map of the movement. And on the Earth Speaker what's it called? .earth or .art? I think .art, right? This is funny. .arc. This is so complicated, everything nowadays. You can see there's a map. It's generally a European project, even though 68 countries are now participating. There's 25 languages. On this map, you see all these small dots, and every single dot is someone saying something which is locally there, right? And it's then wrapped in an artistic or interpretation. There's more and more people singing. There's like lots of singing. I didn't really anticipate. La 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 la. The climate is. This is really, I think, it's really great and also very entertaining. So that was the Earth Speaker. I think you should just go and check it out. The Earth Speaker app. You know, this is my Instagram, Selma. So I've been. Everyone is like, oh, here he goes about Earth Speaker again. They've been hearing it so often from me. See, let me give you a last question, Selma. Anyway, besides, and then I want to hear what you're doing today. Bearing in mind it's Friday, and it's your day off, I guess, from school. Oh, it's a Corona. You have done. My daughter is not in school anyway because there is a digital school. But let me just because so many people were so kind to send questions.
Yeah.
We covered it as soon, so we pretty much covered it. If the government on Fridays for Future swapped roles, what I wanted to say, imagine if all the politicians went to the kindergarten and the schools then. I mean, they swapped, right? That would be funny if they. But go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to comment on Earth Speaker. So, but I just wanted to say, like, what you're doing with Earth Speaker is sort of putting focus on the voice of the youth and the children, right? And I think that's a very good example on how you can use your sort of position of power in the world to create a change and to focus on the voices on the front lines of the decisions on the climate crisis that we're making right now. And I think that's sort of up for reflection for everyone, like, because we all have different amounts of power and resources that we can use. And you, as like a middle-aged white man with like a studio and resources and I guess some money as well, you have the opportunity to make a platform like this, and you can use it to amplify the voice of the youth. So you have like a power position in the world that a lot of people don't have. And I think everyone should like sort of reflect on what is my power position in the world. Like, I'm privileged and in a position of power as well, because I'm a young white girl from like a rich country. So I have different opportunities to do activism and to get people to listen to me than my fellow activists in Uganda have.
Vanessa.
Us that we like because of unfair systems, right, in our society. But I think everyone should reflect on that and how they can use their platform and their position of power to create a change and to put focus on the voices that we need to listen to. Right. And that's what you're doing with your political platform with Earth Speaker, and I think that's a very beautiful.
Yeah, your friend in Vanessa. I actually after I remember you must be speaking. Was it Vanessa? Is that her name?
Yeah.
Your friend in Uganda, who is a climate activist and also focusing on gender inequality in the climate. Yeah, I think she's so amazing. I actually, I invited her to do a project with her, a little bit like what we are doing now. After she was, you could say, censored away from a photo. I believe it was from Davos, and the Guardian, the newspaper, picked up on it and said, "Wow, the press photo misses one person, and she happens to be black and from Uganda, right?" And she and I spoke with her, and she is so incredibly eloquent and amazing, and not because she's young, not because she's a woman, but because she has something incredibly interesting to contribute with, which is so relevant. And I cannot believe that people who claim their sort of say justice or justified platforms such as Davos, the WEF in Davos, would go through this and then take her out of the press photo. And you know, so you're so right to call upon this, and we should. Do you know her Instagram? We could just maybe at least mention it here. People should follow her on Instagram if you recall it. Yeah. Otherwise, I will make a link. I will make a link on my Instagram crossing to her because I do think I haven't been in Uganda. I've been a lot in East Africa, and I've come to like these countries so much. It becomes so important for me, and I've learned. I have been given. I have learned, and I have also taken so much. And I hope I haven't extracted, but I've definitely become a better version of myself as I was able to see myself from the outside in much more diverse ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to say that Vanessa Nakate's Instagram is Vanessa Nakate1, so you can find her.
You're the best. Thank you.
And if I could comment on that again, I think it's so important that we also hear the voices of the people who are on the front lines of the climate crisis, because we can talk about the climate crisis and be very like smart and analyze things and all that, but the fact is we're not living with the consequences. We're in a privileged part of the world and we're not feeling the consequences yet, but people are already dying, people are already losing their homes, And these are the voices, these young people from the global south who's actually experiencing the consequences of the climate crisis, which is a problem that we in the rich countries has created. I think it's so important that we like put focus on their voices and hear their stories and listen to them and act on what they're saying, because they can bring like really important insights, and these are the people on the front lines of the climate crisis, and we cannot like ignore them longer. And I have so many amazing activists, friends who's actually living with the consequences and have so many important things to say, but they're not being listened to because they're not in as privileged positions as we are. And I think it's very important to emphasize their voices also. So just like, yeah, try to follow them, Instagram, find them, Twitter, also to like listen to their voices and gain the insights that they're giving.
Fantastic. No, that's so true. That's so true. And it brings our no to justice. What is actually just? What is a justice council? See, now we sometimes mistakenly think, well, a justice council is something that does justice, so exercises justice. But to do that, you need to have representation. You need to have people on this council or this board or in this group from everywhere, also from the opposition, also from the places you're trying to work or collaborate with. And it's a good example is always to say, if you want to replant a forest, and you want to close a mine, and you make a just council to exercise, to execute the planting of the forest, that just, if it is a just council, it should have the mine workers that you put out of job, regardless of they were mine workers. It's not their fault that they were mine workers in a structural sense. So I just want to say, because what we think is just also sometimes mistakenly has this polarization of exclusion and inclusion. Oh, we are here. This is the art world. We are just the moral high ground. No, it is preventing this pushing out. It's preventing to become the non-compassionate same that we are actually all the time criticizing. And I take that critique I take on me every day. How do I actually embrace the fact that the very same populists that I keep criticizing or fascists, right? Or climate fascists, they were not born a fascist, they became a fascist. And I somehow, I just have to admit that I make mistakes because I somehow objectify this negativity in people in an unjust way. And one can say, and now that's actually also Mary Robinson, justice is institutionalized love. It's so beautiful that this idea that hope, love, these things that are actually hard to exactly measure, no, there are ways to take love, and if we take legislation, it is based on justice. It is because we care for each other. Everyone is right for the law. So when you are doing activism, just because sometimes we think activism, it's over, it's like, oh, here's the politician, oh, they're demonstrating outside. No, activism is a fertilizing machine for the very beginning of legislation that turns into, advocacy, policy, the whole machine, and then you have the change. So I'm just trying to suggest there is a holistic inclusion where we are all parliamentarians, we are all co-producers. There is not outside. I'm over the deadline, but Selma, and I see you. That's why my hope, to a large extent, is fueling on the work that people like you do. I must say, it's so inspiring for me to both to listen to you, but also to know what you do. And I thank you for that, quite seriously. How do you say? Like with my heart and with my brain, if I have any.
Yeah.
If I have any heart, I should say.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this live stream. This has been a very interesting conversation.
Oh, thank you for saying that. We will do something else soon. I had actually some questions on some new works I was working on. I didn't dare to ask you the first time we met. And now it's like now I feel I know you a little bit. So I had some pretty complicated things, but you're so intelligent. I would definitely want to, maybe we'll catch up soon, and I'll just ask you for some advice because I have a wonderful new project that I won't talk about here on the out on the sort of whatever it is. Oh, that was great. No, so I look forward to stay in touch, and I wish you good luck on today's Children's Day. What are you actually doing afterwards? I forgot to give the answer on that.
Yeah, so we're not striking right now because of the corona crisis. So we're staying inside and trying to do online activism. Because we know the importance of taking a crisis seriously, right? Also the corona crisis. Yeah.
Well, online activism, that means I'm taking up your important time, so I should hurry. No, thank you again. And also for everyone listening in, I'll see you soon again. This is so exciting. I can sit and do nothing and still talk a lot and then talk to all the people that I apparently have as followers. I thank you all. And for the people who set this up as well. I have an assistant who says, look at this. No, it's all good. Well, she said, end it. Thank you, Selma. I'll see you shortly.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.